Step back, sir. Security concern. Lisa Matthews said this to a black man in business clothes holding a valid boarding pass. She'd said it 17 times in 6 months to 17 different black passengers. She didn't know James Porter had documented all 17 incidents. And she definitely didn't know he was the federal official who could shut down her entire airline. In about 90 seconds, her 8-year career was about to end on camera. This is a story about patterns that become federal cases, about 18 incidents that should have been 0, about the moment when documentation becomes confrontation and accountability finally arrives. Stay with me, because what happens at Gate 14 in Phoenix is about to change an entire airline and expose a system that's been failing for years. The Arizona sun was already intense at 9 in the morning, flooding Terminal 4 of Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport with harsh desert light. The terminal buzzed with the controlled chaos of a major hub. Business travelers power walking to connections, families navigating the maze toward their gates, the constant ambient noise of announcements and rolling luggage. At Gate 14, Sky Connect Airlines Flight 227 to Washington, D.C. was preparing for boarding. A routine cross-country flight. 3,000 miles, 5 hours. Nothing unusual about it except for one passenger who'd been planning this exact scenario for 6 months. James Porter stood near the windows overlooking the tarmac, away from the main crowd gathering at the gate. At 42 years old, he was an imposing figure, 6 feet tall with a solid build that came from years of playing college football. His skin was a deep mahogany, his hair cut short and graying slightly at the temples. He wore rimless glasses that gave him an intellectual, professional appearance. His clothing was deliberately chosen: a pressed light blue button-down shirt, navy slacks, polished brown leather shoes, and a leather messenger bag across his shoulder. Business casual, professional but not flashy, the kind of outfit a consultant or mid-level executive might wear on a work trip. Completely unremarkable, completely appropriate, and completely irrelevant to what was about to happen. Because James Porter was the Director of Aviation Safety for the Federal Aviation Administration's Western region. He oversaw safety compliance, investigated accidents, and enforced federal aviation regulations for hundreds of airlines operating in 12 western states. He had the authority to ground aircraft, suspend licenses, and initiate federal investigations that could shut down airlines permanently. And for the past 6 months, he'd been flying undercover on Sky Connect Airlines, documenting a pattern of racial discrimination so consistent, so systematic, that it could no longer be dismissed as isolated incidents or misunderstandings. James pulled out his phone and opened a secure, encrypted app. On the screen was a spreadsheet he'd been maintaining meticulously. Incident 1, January 14, Gate 7 LX. Black male passenger, business attire. Additional screening required. White passengers ahead and behind, no additional screening. Incident 2, January 28, Gate 22, Denver. Black female passenger, casual dress. Boarding pass needs verification. Agent called supervisor. 10-minute delay. Passenger missed connection. Incident 3, February 5, Gate 14, Phoenix. Black male passenger, himself, asked for secondary identification despite having valid driver's license and boarding pass. White couple behind him waved through without question. The list went on. 17 incidents. 17 times that black passengers on Sky Connect had been stopped, questioned, delayed, or treated differently than white passengers in identical situations. Different airports, different gate agents, different flights, but the same airline, the same pattern, the same discrimination. James had documented everything: photos, videos, audio recordings, witness statements from other passengers who'd seen the incidents and reached out to him afterward when they learned he was investigating. Timestamps, employee names, badge numbers. He'd filed formal complaints through Sky Connect's official channels. All 17 had been investigated by internal management and dismissed. No evidence of discrimination. Agent was following standard security procedures. Passenger behavior may have contributed to interaction. The same corporate language designed to protect employees and avoid liability. But James wasn't just another passenger with a complaint. He was a federal official with the authority to do something about it. And today was incident number 18, the one that would finally force accountability. The gate agent for Flight 227 was Lisa Matthews. James had been tracking her for 3 months. She'd appeared in 5 of his 17 documented incidents, the highest count of any single employee. She had a pattern of stopping black passengers for additional verification, while allowing white passengers to board without question. She was careful about it, never overtly racist, never using slurs, always framing her actions as following procedure or security concerns. But the pattern was undeniable. James had requested her personnel file through official FAA channels. 8 years with SkyConnect, generally positive performance reviews, a few passenger complaints, but nothing that had resulted in discipline. The complaints, when he read them, were telling. Made me feel like a criminal for flying first class while black. Stopped me 3 times while white passengers walked through. Asked for my ID twice, then called her supervisor to verify my ticket was real. All complaints filed by passengers of color. All dismissed by management. Today would be different. Lisa Matthews made the boarding announcement, her voice carrying the practiced cheerfulness of someone who'd done this thousands of times. Good morning, passengers. We'll now begin boarding SkyConnect Flight 227 to Washington, D.C. At this time, we'd like to invite our first-class passengers and Elite Premier members to board. James picked up his messenger bag and walked toward the gate. He had a first-class ticket, seat 3B, aisle. He'd purchased it 6 weeks ago, specifically for this flight, specifically for this gate agent. As he approached, he observed the boarding process. A white couple in their 60s with first-class tickets walked up. Lisa scanned their passes with a smile. Have a wonderful flight. A white businessman in an expensive suit. Quick scan, friendly nod. Enjoy. A young woman with a crying baby and a ton of luggage. Lisa even helped her with a bag. You've got this, Mama. Have a safe trip. Then it was James's turn. He handed her his boarding pass and his driver's license. Standard procedure at many gates, though not always required. Lisa took both, looked at the boarding pass, then at James, then back at the pass. Her smile faded slightly. Mr. Porter, she said, pronouncing his name slowly. This shows first class, seat 3B. Yes, that's correct, James replied evenly. Lisa studied the boarding pass more closely, as if looking for something wrong with it. Behind James, other passengers were lining up. One moment, sir. She scanned her pass. It beeped green, valid. But instead of handing it back, she kept looking at it. Can I see your credit card? The one you used to purchase this ticket? James felt the familiar weight of it. The moment when a simple transaction became an interrogation. My boarding pass is valid. My ID matches my name. Is there a problem? I just need to verify the purchase, sir. Credit card fraud is a concern. It's a concern for me as well, or for the 3 passengers you just boarded without asking for their credit cards. Lisa's expression hardened. Sir, I'm following standard security procedures. Are you? Because I've been watching you board passengers for the past 15 minutes, and I'm the first person you've asked for a credit card. What's different about me? The passengers behind James were watching now, phones coming out of pockets. This was the moment when implicit bias became explicit discrimination, and everything was being documented. Sir, if you're going to be difficult, I'm going to need to call my supervisor. Please do, James said calmly. And while you're at it, call security too. I want to make sure this is all properly documented. Lisa's face flushed. She wasn't used to passengers who didn't back down, who didn't just comply and swallow their humiliation. She pressed a button on her radio. Supervisor to gate 14, please, and security. She looked at James with barely concealed contempt. Sir, you're going to need to step aside while we verify your ticket. I'm not stepping aside. My ticket is valid. My ID is valid. You've given me no legitimate reason to deny boarding. The reason is that I have a security concern. Based on what? What specifically about me or my behavior constitutes a security concern? Lisa didn't answer. She didn't have to. They both knew what the concern was. A supervisor arrived, a white man in his 40s named Tom Bradley. He'd appeared in 2 of James's documented incidents, both times backing up gate agents who were discriminating against black passengers. "What's the situation, Lisa?" Bradley asked. "This passenger is refusing to comply with security verification procedures," Lisa said, her voice taking on a victimized tone. "I asked for his credit card to verify his ticket purchase, and he became confrontational." "That's not what happened," said a white woman in line behind James. "I've been standing here the whole time. You didn't ask anyone else for a credit card, just him." Bradley ignored her. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside and show us your credit card, or you won't be boarding this flight." "On what grounds?" James asked. "What federal regulation or airline policy requires a passenger to show a credit card to board when they have a valid boarding pass and ID?" "Company policy." "Show me the policy, in writing, because I've read SkyConnect's conditions of carriage and there's no such requirement." Bradley's expression darkened. 2 security officers arrived, both white men, middle-aged, looking tired before their shift had barely begun. "We've got a passenger refusing to comply," Bradley told them. "He needs to be removed from the boarding area." The first security officer looked at James, then at Lisa and Bradley. Something in his expression suggested he'd seen this before. "Sir, what's the issue?" "There is no issue," James said calmly. "I have a valid first-class ticket and valid identification. I'm being denied boarding without legitimate cause, and I believe it's because I'm black. These 3 passengers," he gestured to the white couple, the businessman, and the woman with the baby, all now watching from the jet bridge, "were all allowed to board without additional verification. I'm being singled out." "That's ridiculous," Lisa snapped. "This has nothing to do with race." "Then explain the pattern," James interrupted. He pulled out his phone and opened his documentation app. "I have 17 documented incidents over 6 months of black passengers being stopped, questioned, or delayed by SkyConnect employees, while white passengers in identical situations were allowed to board without issue. 5 of those 17 involved you specifically, Ms. Matthews. You have a pattern of discriminatory behavior." Lisa's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about." "January 14, LAX, Gate 7. You stopped a black businessman and demanded secondary ID. February 11, Phoenix, this gate. You called security on a black woman because you said her ticket seemed suspicious. March 3, "Who are you?" Bradley demanded. "Are you recording our employees?" James reached into his messenger bag. The security officers tensed, hands moving toward their radios. "I'm reaching for my credentials," James said clearly. "Federal identification." He pulled out a leather wallet and opened it, holding it up so Lisa, Bradley, and the security officers could see it clearly. "Federal Aviation Administration, Director of Aviation Safety, Western Region," complete with his photo, federal seal, and signature. The reaction was instantaneous. Lisa's mouth fell open, her face going from pale to white. Bradley actually took a step backward, his expression shifting from aggressive to horrified in seconds. The security officers looked at each other, clearly realizing they just walked into something way above their pay grade. "My name is James Porter," James said, his voice calm but carrying absolute authority. "For the past 6 months, I've been conducting an undercover investigation into discrimination complaints against SkyConnect Airlines. I have documented 17 separate incidents of black passengers being treated differently than white passengers, stopped for additional verification, subjected to extra security screening, denied boarding, or delayed, all without legitimate cause. Today marks incident number 18. He looked directly at Lisa. "Miss Matthews, you personally appear in 5 of those 17 incidents. You have consistently stopped black passengers for verification while allowing white passengers with identical documentation to board without question. This is not security. This is racial profiling, and it's a violation of federal civil rights law and FAA regulations." I didn't," Lisa stammered, her carefully constructed authority crumbling. "I was just following procedure." "Show me the procedure," James said coldly. "Show me the written policy that says you should ask black passengers for credit cards while white passengers get waved through. Show me the security protocol that justifies stopping passengers based on the color of their skin." Bradley tried to intervene. "Director Porter, I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding." "It's not a misunderstanding, Mr. Bradley. It's systematic discrimination, and you've been complicit in it. I have documentation of you backing up discriminatory actions by gate agents on 2 separate occasions, including one where you threatened to have a black passenger arrested for creating a disturbance when all he did was question why he was being treated differently." The boarding area had gone completely silent. Every passenger was watching. Multiple phones were recording. This wasn't just a confrontation anymore, it was a public reckoning. James addressed the security officers. "Gentlemen, I appreciate your response, but your services aren't needed. However, I will need you to file a report documenting everything you witnessed here today. The fact that I was stopped for additional verification while white passengers were not. The fact that Ms. Matthews called security on a federal official for having valid boarding documents, and the fact that Mr. Bradley attempted to have me removed for questioning discriminatory treatment." The first officer nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. We'll file a complete report." James turned back to Lisa and Bradley. "As of this moment, both of you are suspended pending federal investigation. You will surrender your employee credentials to airport security. A replacement gate agent will be assigned to complete boarding for this flight. You are not to contact passengers, interfere with this flight's operations, or discuss this incident with other employees. Is that understood?"
"You can't just," Bradley started. "I absolutely can. I have the authority to shut down this entire airline's operations if I determine there's a pattern of safety violations or regulatory non-compliance. And discrimination is a regulatory violation. So yes, I can suspend employees, I can ground aircraft, and I can initiate federal investigations, which is exactly what I'm doing." Lisa was crying now, the reality of her situation finally hitting her. 8 years of employment, her career, her income, all ending because she couldn't see past her own biases. "Please," she whispered, "I have a family. I need this job. I wasn't trying to." "You did mean it," James said, not unkindly but firmly. "Maybe not consciously. Maybe you told yourself you were just being thorough, just following your instincts. But you applied those instincts selectively, only to black passengers. That's racism, Miss Matthews, and whether it was intentional or not, the impact is the same. Passengers were humiliated, delayed, made to feel like criminals for trying to board planes they'd paid for. Because of you." He addressed the crowd of watching passengers. "To everyone who witnessed this, I apologize on behalf of the Federal Aviation Administration. What happened here today should never happen. We're supposed to be able to travel freely, regardless of race, without being subjected to discriminatory treatment. The fact that this has been happening systematically for months is unacceptable, and it ends today." A replacement gate agent arrived, looking nervous and confused. James briefed her quickly, then handed her his boarding pass. She scanned it without question and gestured toward the jet bridge. "Gates open, sir." As James walked down the jet bridge toward the aircraft, he could hear the conversations erupting behind him. Passengers talking, phones buzzing with texts and posts to social media, the videos already uploading, spreading, going viral. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt exhausted. Because this was incident 18. 18 times in 6 months that he'd been stopped, questioned, treated as suspicious for the crime of being black in an airport. How many other black passengers had experienced the same thing but didn't have his federal authority to fight back? How many had just accepted the humiliation because they didn't think anything would change? James boarded the aircraft. The flight attendants greeted him normally, unaware of what had just happened at the gate. He found his seat, 3B, the seat Lisa had tried to deny him, and sat down. His phone was buzzing constantly now. His office, his superiors, news organizations somehow already hearing about the incident. He turned it on airplane mode and closed his eyes. The real work was about to begin. The investigation, the interviews, the review of policies and training, the uncomfortable conversations with airline leadership about how their company culture had allowed this to happen for so long. But for now, for just a moment, James Porter sat in the seat he'd paid for on the flight he had every right to take, and breathed.
The Boeing 757 reached its cruising altitude of 37,000 feet, the Arizona desert giving way to New Mexico's high plains below. Inside the first-class cabin, the atmosphere was unusual. Word had spread through the aircraft about what happened at the gate. Passengers kept glancing at James in 3B, some with curiosity, others with gratitude, a few with that uncomfortable recognition of having witnessed something significant. James had his laptop open, but he wasn't working. He was staring at his phone, which he turned back on once they reached altitude. 43 missed calls, 67 text messages. His inbox was flooded. One text stood out from his boss, Regional Administrator Patricia Chang. "Just saw the videos. They're everywhere. Call me immediately." Another from his wife, Monica. "Baby, are you okay? I'm watching this blow up on Twitter. People are calling you a hero, but I know you. You're probably exhausted. Call me when you land. I love you." James typed back to Monica, "I'm okay. Just tired. Very tired. Love you too." He opened Twitter. The videos were indeed everywhere, multiple angles from different passengers. The hashtag #Gate14 was trending. So was hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack. News organizations were already writing articles. FAA director exposes airline discrimination. Federal official documents racial profiling. SkyConnect Airlines under investigation after viral gate incident. The comments were predictably divided. Thousands supporting him, sharing their own stories of discrimination while traveling. But also the backlash, people claiming he was playing the race card, that Lisa was just doing her job, that he was looking for a reason to be offended. James closed the app. He'd seen this pattern before. The initial outrage, the support, then the inevitable counter-narrative that would try to make the discriminator into the victim. A flight attendant approached, a black woman in her 50s named Carol. She leaned down and spoke quietly. "Mr. Porter, I just want to say thank you. I've been flying for 30 years, and I've seen what happened to you happen to countless passengers. Black passengers, Latino passengers, Muslim passengers. And nobody with power ever did anything about it. Thank you for using yours." "How long have you been with SkyConnect?" James asked. 15 years. "Have you witnessed discrimination by gate agents or other crew?" Carol hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, many times. Lisa Matthews, she has a reputation among the crew. We know which agents profile. We know which ones call security on black passengers for no reason. But we're told not to interfere. It's not our jurisdiction. Gate operations are separate from flight operations." "Would you be willing to give a formal statement to the FAA investigation?" Carol's eyes widened. "There's going to be an investigation?" "There's going to be a comprehensive federal audit of SkyConnect's entire operation. Every complaint filed in the past 5 years. Every incident report. Every gate agent with a pattern of discrimination. And I need crew members who've witnessed this to come forward. Will we be protected from retaliation? Federal whistleblower protections apply. Any retaliation would be an additional violation. You'll be protected." Carol pulled out her phone. "Then yes, I'll give a statement, and I can give you names of other crew members who've witnessed the same things. We've been keeping our own informal records because we knew the internal reporting system wasn't working." James took her information. This was exactly what he needed. Insider witnesses who could corroborate the pattern beyond his own documentation. His phone rang. Patricia Chang, his boss. He had to take this call. "James, what the hell happened in Phoenix?" Her voice was tight but not angry, concerned. "Exactly what I warned you would happen 6 months ago when I proposed this investigation. I found systematic discrimination, documented it, and when I experienced it personally, I enforced federal regulations. By suspending 2 employees on the spot, James, you know that's going to create a firestorm. It already is a firestorm. The question is whether we're going to stand behind federal anti-discrimination law or whether we're going to back down because an airline is upset about accountability.
Patricia sighed. I'm not saying you were wrong, but this is going to escalate beyond the Western region. The administrator is already getting calls. The airline's lawyers are threatening lawsuits. The pilots' union is demanding answers about federal overreach. I documented 18 incidents of discrimination in 6 months. 18! And that's just what I personally witnessed. How many more happened that I didn't see? How many black passengers have been humiliated, delayed, denied boarding because of the color of their skin, and nobody with authority did anything about it? I know. And James, off the record, I'm proud of you. This needed to happen. But on the record, you need to be prepared for a political battle. The airline is going to fight this. They're going to claim you entrapped their employees. They're going to say you were looking for incidents to justify a predetermined conclusion. Let them claim whatever they want. I have video evidence, audio recordings, witness statements, time-stamped documentation. A pattern so clear that no reasonable person could dispute it. We can win this. Okay, I'm authorizing the full investigation. You'll have a team of 6 investigators, full subpoena authority, and access to all SkyConnect records. But James, be ready. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. After they hung up, James looked out the window at the landscape passing below. Somewhere down there were people going about their lives, unaware that a video of a confrontation at 37,000 feet was reshaping conversations about race and travel. An elderly black man in the seat across the aisle leaned over. "Excuse me, son. I don't mean to intrude, but I wanted to shake your hand." James shook his hand. "Thank you, sir. Do you know how many times I've been stopped at gates, pulled aside for random screening, had my ticket questioned? I'm 73 years old. I've been flying since the 1970s, and it's never gotten better. Maybe now it will." "That's the goal," James said. "To make sure what happened to me, what happened to you, stops happening to the next generation." "My grandson wants to be a pilot," the man said. "He's 15, smart as a whip, but he's scared. He sees how black people get treated in airports, and he doesn't think he'd be able to handle it every day. Maybe after this, he won't have to." The weight of that, the idea that his actions might help a 15-year-old kid somewhere dream of flying, hit James harder than any of the anger or exhaustion. "What's your grandson's name?" James asked. "Marcus. Marcus Johnson." James pulled out a business card. "Have Marcus email me. I run a mentorship program for aspiring pilots from underrepresented communities. We'll get him connected with black pilots, help him navigate the pathway, and make sure he has support." The man's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. Truly, thank you." As the flight continued eastward, James spent the remaining hours doing what he'd done for 6 months, documenting. He wrote detailed notes about the incident at Gate 14. He reviewed his spreadsheet of previous incidents, adding context and cross-references. He drafted the outline for his formal investigation report. The work was methodical, procedural, bureaucratic, but it mattered, because every detail he documented was a piece of evidence. Every timestamp was proof. Every witness statement was validation for passengers who'd been gaslit into thinking their experiences weren't real. The FAA's headquarters building in Washington, D.C. was an imposing structure of glass and steel, housing the agency that regulated every aspect of American aviation. James sat in a conference room on the 8th floor, facing a panel of senior officials including the FAA administrator herself, Director Helen Morrison. Also present via video conference, SkyConnect's CEO, Richard Holloway, and their Chief Legal Officer, Amanda Price. "Let me be clear about something," Administrator Morrison began, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd spent 40 years in aviation.
The FAA does not take allegations of discrimination lightly. Director Porter has presented compelling evidence of a pattern of discriminatory behavior by SkyConnect employees. We are launching a comprehensive investigation. Holloway, on the screen, looked like he's aged 10 years in 3 days. Administrator Morrison, SkyConnect categorically denies any systematic discrimination. What happened at Gate 14 was an unfortunate incident involving one employee who may have used poor judgment. 18 incidents, not one. 18 that I personally documented over 6 months, all involving black passengers being treated differently than white passengers in identical situations. 5 of those involved the same gate agent, Lisa Matthews. That's not poor judgment, that's a pattern. Amanda Price, the lawyer, leaned forward on screen. Director Porter, with respect, the manner in which you conducted this investigation raises serious questions. You flew undercover, recording employees without their knowledge. Recording in public spaces where there's no expectation of privacy, which is legal. Documenting interactions where I was the subject of discrimination, which is my right. And fulfilling my duties as an FAA official to investigate complaints and ensure regulatory compliance. But you didn't just investigate, you entrapped our employees. I bought tickets and showed up at gates with valid documentation. If your employees engaged in discrimination when confronted with a black passenger, that's not entrapment, that's their choice. Morrison held up her hand. Let's focus on the facts. Director Porter, walk us through your evidence. James pulled up his presentation. For the next hour, he laid out everything. The spreadsheet of 18 incidents with dates, times, locations, and employee names. Video footage from his phone showing differential treatment. Black passengers stopped for additional verification while white passengers weren't. Audio recordings of gate agents making security claims that weren't applied to white passengers. Witness statements from other passengers who'd seen the discrimination and contacted him afterward. Then he showed the pattern analysis. Lisa Matthews, 5 incidents over 3 months. Tom Bradley, 3 incidents backing up discriminatory gate agents. 6 other gate agents with 2 incidents each, all at SkyConnect, all following the same pattern. This isn't about individual bad actors, James concluded. This is about a culture that allowed discrimination to flourish, a reporting system that dismissed complaints from passengers of color, training that was ineffective, and management that protected employees rather than protecting passengers. Holloway looked sick. Director Porter, if what you're presenting is accurate, and I'm not conceding that it is, what do you want from SkyConnect?
I want what federal law requires, a comprehensive review of your hiring, training, and oversight practices. Mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing employees conducted by external experts, not internal HR. An independent passenger complaint system that doesn't route through management who were friends with the accused. And accountability. Every employee involved in these 18 incidents faces consequences proportional to their actions. You're talking about firing people. I'm talking about enforcing the law. If your employees discriminated against passengers, they violated federal civil rights law and FAA regulations. Consequences for breaking the law aren't optional. Amanda Price's expression was calculating. And if we don't comply? Morrison answered before James could. Then the FAA will take enforcement action. That could include fines, operational restrictions, or suspension of your operating certificate. Director Porter has documented violations of federal regulations. We have the authority and the obligation to ensure compliance. The meeting continued for another hour, with lawyers posturing and executives trying to minimize. But the conclusion was inevitable. SkyConnect would comply or face federal action that could shut them down. After the video conference ended, Morrison pulled James aside. That was good work. Thorough, documented, unimpeachable. But James, I need to ask, how are you doing? Personally, James considered the question. Tired. Angry that it had to come to this. But also, hopeful, maybe, that something might actually change. It will change, because of what you did. But be prepared.
This is going to follow you for the rest of your career. Some people will see you as a hero. Others will see you as someone who destroyed careers over political correctness. You're going to be polarizing. I can live with that. What I can't live with is knowing discrimination is happening and doing nothing about it." After the video conference ended, Morrison pulled James aside. "That was good work. Thorough, documented, unimpeachable. But James, I need to ask, how are you doing? Personally?" James considered the question. Tired. Angry that it had to come to this. But also hopeful, maybe, that something might actually change. It will change, because of what you did. But be prepared. This is going to follow you for the rest of your career. Some people will see you as a hero. Others will see you as someone who destroyed careers over political correctness. You're going to be polarizing. I can live with that. What I can't live with is knowing discrimination is happening and doing nothing about it. Scene 4. Sky Connect headquarters, 1 week later. Lisa Matthews sat in a small, windowless room at Sky Connect's corporate headquarters in Dallas, across from HR Director Karen Williams and a union representative. Her employment was being terminated. 8 years, ending in a form letter and a box for her desk belongings. "You understand," Karen was saying in that carefully neutral HR voice, "that your actions at Gate 14 violated company policy regarding equal treatment of passengers. Combined with the pattern documented by Director Porter, we have no choice but to terminate your employment." Lisa had been crying for days. "I never meant to discriminate. I was just doing my job, following my training. They taught us to look for things that seem suspicious. And you applied that training exclusively to black passengers," Karen said. 5 documented incidents in 3 months. Always passengers of color. Never white passengers in identical situations. That's not training, that's bias. "But I didn't do it because they were black. I thought." Lisa trailed off, finally confronting the uncomfortable truth she'd been avoiding. She had thought they were suspicious. She had applied extra scrutiny. And the only common denominator was race. "I'm sorry. I really am. I didn't see it. I didn't think I was being racist. But I was, wasn't I?" It was the first time she'd said it out loud. The first time she'd stopped defending herself and actually looked at her actions honestly. "The FAA investigation is ongoing," Karen said. "You may face federal civil rights charges depending on their findings. The union will help you with legal representation if needed. But your employment with Sky Connect is terminated effective immediately." Lisa took her termination letter and left. In the parking lot, she sat in her car and finally let herself fully break down. 8 years of her life, her income, her identity as someone good at her job, someone professional. All gone because she couldn't see past her own unconscious biases. Her phone buzzed. A text from a former coworker. "I'm sorry about what happened, but Lisa, I need you to know, I'm black and I watched you treat passengers differently. I wanted to say something, but I was scared. I'm glad someone finally did." Lisa read the text 3 times. One of her own colleagues, someone she'd worked with for years, someone she'd considered a friend, had seen her racism and stayed silent out of fear. The magnitude of what she'd done, what she'd become, finally hit her fully. She needed to do better, to be better. But first, she needed to accept what she'd been. James Porter stood at the podium at the annual Aviation Safety Conference in Las Vegas, looking out at an audience of 800 aviation professionals. He'd been invited to speak about the Sky Connect investigation and its aftermath. "6 months ago," he began, "I was blocked from boarding a plane I had every right to board. It was the 18th time in 6 months that I'd been stopped, questioned, or treated as suspicious while trying to fly. Today, I'm here to talk about what happened next, and more importantly, what needs to happen going forward." He clicked through his presentation, showing the results of the investigation. Sky Connect had been fined $2.3 million for civil rights violations. 11 employees had been terminated. 43 had been required to undergo intensive anti-bias training. The airline's entire complaint system had been overhauled. But more significantly, the investigation had triggered a chain reaction. Other airlines had voluntarily reviewed their own practices. The FAA had issued new guidance on preventing discrimination. Congress was considering legislation to strengthen passenger protections. The numbers tell one story, James said, but I want to tell you about Marcus Johnson. He's a 16-year-old kid who wants to be a pilot. Before the Gate 14 incident, he was afraid to pursue his dream because of how he saw black people treated in airports. Today, he's enrolled in a flight training program. That's what this is really about, making sure the next generation doesn't have to fight the same battles we did. After his speech, dozens of people approached him, some to share their own stories of discrimination, others to ask how they could help make aviation more equitable, a few to quietly thank him for giving voice to experiences they'd had but felt powerless to address. One woman, a gate agent for a different airline, pulled him aside. I went through my own mental checklist after watching your videos. How many times had I stopped passengers of color for verification while waving through white passengers? How many times had I told myself I was just being thorough, just following my instincts? Your case made me confront my own biases. I'm doing better now. Not perfect, but better. Thank you. That evening, James called his wife from his hotel room. "How are you holding up?" Monica asked. "I'm okay. Tired, but okay. Today felt good, like maybe something is actually changing." "It is changing, because of you. But baby, don't forget to take care of yourself too. You've been carrying this for a long time." "I know, and I will. But Monica, there are so many more Marcus Johnsons out there. Kids who should be able to dream of flying without being afraid. That's worth being tired for." "I know it is. That's why I love you. Just promise me you'll come home and rest after this conference." "I promise." After they hung up, James stood at the window of his hotel room, looking out at the Las Vegas lights. Somewhere in those lights was the future. A future where maybe, just maybe, black passengers could board planes without being treated as suspicious. Where gate agents saw passengers as individuals rather than stereotypes. Where a kid like Marcus Johnson could pursue his dreams without fear. It wasn't there yet, but for the first time in a long time, James believed it was possible. James Porter stood at Gate 14 in Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport exactly 1 year after the incident that changed everything. He wore the same light blue button-down shirt, navy slacks, and leather messenger bag. Testing. Always testing. Flight 227 to Washington, D.C. was boarding again. A different gate agent stood at the podium, a young black woman named Tasha Williams. When James approached with his boarding pass, she scanned it with a professional smile. "Good morning, Mr. Porter. Seat 3B. Have a wonderful flight." No additional questions, no request for a credit card, no security concerns, just a normal boarding process. James walked down the jet bridge feeling something he hadn't felt in years when boarding a plane. Unremarkable. Not watched, not suspected, not profiled. Just another passenger. But he knew the work wasn't finished. One airline changing wasn't enough. 1 year of progress could still regress if vigilance faltered. On the plane, he took his seat. A text came through from Marcus Johnson, the teenager whose grandfather he'd met a year ago. "Mr. Porter, I just soloed for the first time. 1.2 hours in a Cessna 172. I'm really doing this. Thank you for believing I could." James smiled and typed back. "Congratulations, Marcus. Your grandfather would be proud. Keep going. Aviation needs pilots like you." The flight to D.C. was routine. No incidents, no drama. Just 5 hours of normal air travel, which was, in itself, a victory. Lisa Matthews stood in front of a classroom at Phoenix Community College, facing 30 adults in a diversity and inclusion training seminar. She was one of the instructors now, teaching a course on confronting unconscious bias. "My name is Lisa," she began, her voice steady despite the discomfort of what she was about to share. "And a year ago, I was fired from my job as a gate agent for racially profiling passengers. I spent 8 years discriminating against people without even realizing I was doing it." She pulled up a slide showing her own documentation, the 5 incidents James Porter had recorded involving her. Watching herself on video, stopping black passengers while waving white passengers through, still made her physically ill. I told myself I was just being thorough, just following my instincts, just doing my job. But my instincts were shaped by bias I didn't even know I had. I saw black passengers as more suspicious, more likely to be problems, more in need of verification, and I ruined their travel experiences because of my own prejudice. A woman in the class raised her hand. "How did you finally see it?" I didn't. I was forced to see it. A federal investigator documented my pattern of discrimination, confronted me with video evidence, and I lost my career. Only then did I stop defending myself and actually look at what I'd been doing. It took losing everything for me to confront my racism. Lisa's voice cracked slightly. "I'll never get those passengers back. I'll never be able to apologize to all the people I made feel like criminals for having the audacity to fly while black. But what I can do is make sure other people don't make my mistakes. That's why I'm here. That's why I share my story even though it's humiliating. Because if one person in this room sees themselves in my story and chooses to do better, then maybe some good comes from the harm I caused." After the class, a Latino man in his 50s approached her. "I'm a TSA supervisor. I've been doing this job for 12 years, and listening to you, I realized I've been doing the same thing. Different context, same bias. I pull people aside for random secondary screening, and when I really think about it, they're almost never white. Thank you for your honesty." "Don't thank me," Lisa said. "Just do better. That's all any of us can do." James sat at a witness table in the Rayburn House office building, facing the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. The hearing was titled Discrimination in Air Travel, Ensuring Equal Treatment for All Passengers. Representative Maria Santos, chair of the Aviation Subcommittee, addressed James directly. "Director Porter, your investigation into SkyConnect Airlines exposed systematic discrimination. But was this isolated to one airline, or is this a broader industry problem?" "It's broader," James replied. "SkyConnect was egregious, which is why I focused my investigation there. But I've received over 2,000 complaints from passengers across dozens of airlines since the Gate 14 incident went public. The pattern is consistent. Passengers of color, particularly black passengers, are disproportionately stopped for additional screening, questioned about ticket authenticity, subjected to enhanced scrutiny, and treated as suspicious in ways white passengers are not." "What's the solution?" another representative asked. "Systematic reform. First, mandatory bias training for all airline and airport personnel conducted by qualified external organizations, not internal HR departments reading from scripts. Second, independent complaint systems where passengers can report discrimination directly to federal authorities, not to the same airline that employed the discriminator. Third, real consequences. Employees who engage in discrimination should face termination, and airlines that tolerate patterns of discrimination should face significant fines and operational restrictions." A Republican representative leaned forward. "Director Porter, some have criticized your methods. You essentially conducted a sting operation against an airline. Isn't that entrapment?" "I bought tickets and showed up at gates with valid documentation. If that's a sting operation, then every passenger is conducting one every time they fly. The only difference is that I documented what happened to me and had the authority to do something about it. The discrimination was always there. I just made it visible." The hearing continued for 3 hours. James presented data, showed video evidence, and answered questions ranging from thoughtful to hostile. By the end, there was bipartisan agreement that legislation was needed. 6 months later, the Passenger Equal Treatment Act passed Congress and was signed into law. It mandated federal oversight of airline discrimination complaints, required regular bias audits, and established significant penalties for airlines with patterns of discriminatory behavior. It wasn't a complete solution. Laws on paper didn't automatically change hearts or culture. But it was progress. Real, measurable progress. 2 years after Gate 14, James stood in a hangar at Phoenix Deer Valley Airport watching 15 teenagers from underrepresented communities get their first flight lesson. The program he'd started, Future Wings, provided flight training, mentorship, and financial support for aspiring pilots of color. Marcus Johnson, now 18, was one of them. He'd just passed his private pilot check ride the week before and was now helping instruct younger students. "Mr. Porter," Marcus said, walk it over with a huge smile, "I got my acceptance letter, Embry-Riddle, full scholarship. I'm going to be an airline pilot." James shook his hand firmly. "I never doubted it. You've worked hard, Marcus. You earned this. I wouldn't be here without you, without what you did that day at the gate. You made me believe it was possible. You made yourself believe it. I just removed some obstacles." An older black pilot, Captain Raymond Davis, approached. He'd been flying for 35 years and had experienced more discrimination than James could imagine. "These kids," Raymond said, gesturing to the teenagers, "they're growing up in a different aviation world than we did. Not perfect, but better, because of what you did." "It's still not equal," James said. "No, but it's more equal than it was. That's how progress works. Incremental, exhausting, but real." James watched the teenagers climb into small training aircraft, their faces showing the same mix of excitement and nervousness he'd felt on his first flight decades ago. The difference was they didn't have to wonder if they'd be stopped at gates, questioned about their right to be there, treated as suspicious for pursuing their dreams. Well, they'd face some of that. Racism didn't disappear overnight. But now there were systems in place, accountability, consequences, and people like him watching. 3 years after Gate 14, James sat in his office at FAA Western Region Headquarters reviewing the latest quarterly report on airline discrimination complaints. The numbers had dropped significantly. Not to zero, they'd probably never reach zero, but down 63% from 3 years ago. Sky Connect Airlines had transformed itself, new leadership, complete cultural overhaul. They'd become a model for how airlines could prioritize equality and still be profitable. In fact, their customer satisfaction scores had increased dramatically and their market share had grown. Other airlines had followed suit, some voluntarily, others under pressure from federal audits and the threat of penalties. The industry was changing, slowly, imperfectly, but measurably. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. "Director Porter? This is Captain Marcus Johnson, Skybound Regional Airlines. I just completed my first flight as pilot in command. 28 passengers from Phoenix to Tucson. And sir, not one of them was treated differently because of how they looked, because of the training we have now, because of the culture we're building, because of what you started 3 years ago." James felt his throat tighten. Marcus, the scared 15-year-old who'd been afraid to dream of flying, was now a captain, breaking barriers, changing the industry from within. "Congratulations, Captain Johnson. Your grandfather would be incredibly proud." "He is. He flew with me today, sitting in the back crying the whole flight. He said it's the first time in 50 years of flying that he felt completely safe. Not watched, not profiled, just another passenger. He wanted me to thank you." After they hung up, James sat quietly in his office, looking out at the airport in the distance. Planes taking off and landing, carrying people to destinations, dreams, futures. 3 years ago, he'd been blocked from boarding a plane because of the color of his skin. Today, a young black pilot was commanding aircraft, and passengers of all races were boarding without fear of discrimination. It wasn't perfect. There was still work to do. Always would be. But it was better, and better was worth fighting for. James pulled up his encrypted documentation app, the one he'd used to track those 18 incidents. He hadn't deleted it, kept it as a reminder. And occasionally, he still flew incognito, still tested the system, still documented. Because the moment you stop watching is the moment progress starts sliding backward. His wife, Monica, appeared in his office doorway. "Ready to go home?" "Yeah," James said, closing his laptop. "I'm ready." As they walked to the parking garage, Monica took his hand. "You changed the world, you know. Maybe not the whole world, but your world, Marcus's world, that grandfather's world. All those passengers who fly without being profiled now, that's not nothing. It's not enough, James said. It never will be, but it's something. And something is how you get to everything. James thought about that as they drove home through Phoenix traffic. 3 years of investigations, hearings, testimonies, conflicts, and exhaustion. 3 years of being called a hero by some and an agitator by others. 3 years of making enemies and allies, changing systems, and facing resistance. And at the end of it all, a 15-year-old kid who'd been afraid to dream was now a captain, and his grandfather could fly without fear. Maybe Monica was right. Maybe something was enough, at least for today. This is a fictional story, but the discrimination it depicts is real. Every day, passengers of color face profiling, questioning, and unequal treatment in airports and on planes simply because of how they look. Real change happens when people with power use it for justice, when documentation becomes evidence, when patterns are exposed, when accountability finally arrives. James Porter is fictional, but his courage can be real in each of us. When you witness discrimination, speak up. When you have documentation, use it. When you have power, wield it for equality. Because justice isn't given, it's fought for. One confrontation at a time. One documented incident at a time. One life changed at a time.